Welcome to another edition of Midnight Cable. I'm Giman.
And I'm Brandon. And in this show, we talk about anime that we have watched recently, both new and old.
This week, to keep the momentum going from last week's episode, we'll be looking at another anime film, but this time a much more modern one.
And the one that we chose to cover is something that we have been wanting to talk about so long, the Godzilla anime trilogy. Godzilla Planet of the Monster, City on the Edge of Battle, and The Planet Eater. I consider myself an avid Godzilla watcher.
I, on the other hand, am just a casual, and that's me being generous to myself. But I do like everything about what Godzilla is. We have actually been watching these movies recently by ourselves, the two American remakes and Shin Godzilla by Hideaki Anno. We will be talking about these movies at some point, in fact, many Godzilla movies. But for now, let's talk about these three movies. Godzilla Anime Trilogy is a collaboration between Toho Animation, Polygon Pictures and Netflix, with the writer being Ken Urobushi, previously working on such titles as Psycho Pass Season 1, Puelamaki Madoka Magica, and of course, Fate Zero. The story is a unique take on the Godzilla franchise, as humanity has evacuated from the Earth after Godzilla and other Kaijus completely annihilated their home planet. After being castaways for 2 decades, the survivors of humanity and few other alien races returned to Earth with the use of light speed. They learned 20,000 years have passed since then, and the planet has changed forever, with Godzilla's presence affecting its biosphere. A squad of initial 600 people are led by Captain Haruo Sakaki, as they are determined to reclaim their planet and destroy Godzilla once and for all. However, some of them soon learn that perhaps Godzilla is not the true threat that they should be fighting against. So, Brandon, what did you think of Godzilla Anime Trilogy?
Well, if I were to talk about this trilogy as a whole, as anime, I would say that it is rather mediocre. There is not much inherently unique or special when it comes to the character, the dialogue, and the story in general. The 3D animation was janky and atrocious, but we'll get to that later. But if I were to talk about this as a Godzilla story, then this is entirely different thing. Because you see, I consider myself a Godzilla fan, and I have seen some of the better Godzilla movies out there. And even the worst one where it feels like people were smoking drugs when they make them.
Godzilla says that I should learn to fight my own battles,
I say this is one of the greater Godzilla story that I have seen. It has a good balance of drama, character, decent action, and overall very unique takes on the Godzilla Kaijus and the mythology as a whole. And as much as blasphemous that it would be for me to say, I enjoy this much more than the American Godzilla's movies.
This was definitely better than the last 3D movie we watched, which was blamed also by Netflix, also by the same anime studio who made this. When it comes to me, I'm not as familiar with Godzilla as you. I mean, many of the concepts, such as the characters, lores and everything, but I have seen more than just the 2 American remakes, aside from that TriStar Pictures one, such as Godzilla vs. Biollante and The Return of Godzilla. So I do get the general vibe of things, and well, I am shooting a bit of dark by saying this, but so far this is probably the darkest Godzilla story that I've ever come across, which is not much of a huge shock, considering that this is Ken Urobushi. We are talking about how his previous works that I really like, such as Puelamaki Madoka Magica, Psycho Pass Season 1, and of course Fate Zero. His handwriting is all over in this anime, so that's to be expected. I mean, that's what I also like about him. But when it comes to these movies, it is a bit weird how hugely split people are for this trilogy. I mean, and not in a traditional sense. I mean, there are those people who like the concepts, but then at the same time resent a lot of things that were flawed in these movies, and then there are ones that really hate it, that they just cannot stand it. And while there are many of those flaws that are justified, which we'll be getting much more into detail soon enough, but I guess first we should talk about is the general story to get what exactly are these movies about.
Yes.
Since these are all Godzilla films, you can expect that each movie has a different kaiju as a representative. First there is Godzilla, or rather its offspring. I mean, Godzilla also makes an appearance, but he appears in all these three movies, so he doesn't count. And then there is Mechagodzilla, who appears in sort of a unique incarnation as Mechagodzilla City. And finally, there is King Ghidorah, perhaps in his most horrifying form we've seen so far. While all these movies contain a lot of fights and action and kind of vary in tone, they do have many of the central themes in their story.
Yeah, I mean, when it comes to writing a story for Godzilla movies, you don't need to be a Shakespearean, you don't need to be visionary genius Hideaki Anno. You can just be an average Joe with a decent enough imagination and you can write a Godzilla story. So as long as you have some of the basic themes, I would say, for example, take a look at Godzilla vs. Biollante, a movie that we watched. It was such a simple story, you know, man lost his dead daughter. He has a drive and motivation to bring her back, so he fused her plant with her spirit somehow with Godzilla cell, and it became a giant plant monster. And then suddenly there are terrorists who want to take control of this Godzilla formula, so they release Godzilla into the world, and then, you know, Godzilla and the plant monster fight. Like, you just need to find reason for these kaiju to fight, and then you can make a Godzilla story. So in that aspect, I think the story in general of this whole trilogy was rather unique, and it adds new fresh take on the Godzilla franchise as a whole. Not the conventional Godzilla storytelling. It has the central theme of revenge, retribution, and getting over it, as well as coming back to the old root that Godzilla's story has been always known for.
Yeah, I do agree. Although, when it comes to criticism, you know, for all these three movies, we can both definitely agree that the biggest problem is obviously the first movie. I mean, there's only one word to describe that. Actually, no, two words. Unbearably boring.
Yeah.
I mean, 80% of movies, you know, just talking and nothing of substance. In fact, if I were to sum up this movie, most of the movie goes like this. I'm gonna blow this up. No, you're not. Oh, damn, I'm in jail. Now you're free now. No, you're not. Yes, you are. Okay, I'm free now. Okay, let's go to this planet. Okay, we go. Okay, let's board into this planet with these people. No, you won't. We still will. Damn. Okay, we're now on Earth. Should we be doing something? Should we be doing something? Oh, monsters are attacking. Pow, pow. Should we be doing something? Should we be doing something? Oh, look at this interesting plant life. Should we be doing something? You know, just talking and like that. And while there is obviously this attempt of a world building in the first movie, you know, like talking about how Godzilla has affected this entire planet like that. But the fact that, you know, it's carried by this weak characterization for the main character and everyone else, and this really dry dialogue, it doesn't feel engaging at all. And it just, I can't really describe how much sunk into the couch I was while we were watching that first movie. I
mean, to be fair, while I do agree with you that the whole first movie was totally boring, it did a really decent job of having established the backstory for some of the main character, as well as foreshadowing something for other movie to come. But this is the basic Gen Urobuchi plot structure. I mean, his story always has a rather slow and somewhat boring, you know, beginning. And then only when there's a huge twist happen at the end of the, you know, first arc, that's when his story gets interesting.
I partially disagree on that, because I think the problem here is that the runtime is so long and so dragged out that that kind of slow build up, you know, this small problem that Ken Urobushi's writing usually has, that it's probably at its worst here. I mean, it's not always that much of an issue in his stories like Fate Zero or Puella Maki Modoka Magica, but it is definitely bad here.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely has the same story structure that he's aiming for on all his story, but at the same time, it wasn't executed well. The only memorable moment I remember in the first movie was the moment where the plot twist happened, where it revealed that after all of that hard work to take down that, you know, smaller Godzilla offspring, the real Godzilla appeared. And that is when the movie ends with Mephisto, one of the characters we will be talking about, he delivered this one epic line like,
こちらでは20年、そちらでは2万年ぶりの再会だ。久しいな、破壊の王よ。
That was epic, and the way that Godzilla roared to signify the end of that movie, and the music just poured out like that, like it was, the highlight of that movie for me.
Yeah, that and this one major character dead. Oops, spoilers. But like I said, it's not until the second movie where things get interesting. And oh boy, I mean, if I were to talk about the second movie in general, I would say that the structure from beginning to middle and finally to the conclusion is very well crafted. I mean, first they start out in this, village with these, remnants of former humans who are now Hotua, and then they, discover, this kind of new life form, which is nanometal, related to the Mechagodzilla. Then they go into this place where they journey, in vain hope that they could find something to fight against Godzilla. Then they end up there, then they discover it's still functional, then they start building defenses, then it gives excuses, to a lot of character interactions between the supporting characters, and also a bit of world building in some sense, and what characters' motivations are. And then of course then there is the climactic battle and the conclusion, which is while the first movie was definitely bittersweet and somewhat dark, that the second movie goes miles above, doing that.
Yes, I mean, this movie done so many things that I would consider to be the Empire Strike Back of this entire whole trilogy. Not only does we have unique character interaction, we have really engaging character relationship, and we are showcased the struggle of their own, philosophy, their own thinkings, and their way of viewing Godzilla. And I really appreciate the attempt of having a more engaging action scene by showcasing the human working together with the Biru Saludos to take down the Godzilla using Mechagodzilla City. It does offer us a very unique perspective into the Mechagodzilla, because this movie has a really distinct sci-fi theme to it, where it's kind of showcases us the theme of technology, not just with the Mechagodzilla, but also with the Biru Saludo and how their worldview is, based on the technological advancements, such like that.
Yeah, I also like that when it comes to the conclusion itself, I think it improves a whole lot. Because the first movie was like that, well, everyone seems dead, except not, because we already know that there are 2 more movies. But the fact that this movie ends on building up to the climax of the third movie, with the earlier dialogue suggesting that there is a much greater threat than Godzilla, and then post-credit scene, Metphius just, utters this word of Ghidorah, and unlike the first movie, it just makes you feel like that, wow, I gotta watch the rest of this to see how it all ends. I like that.
Yeah, and it also has one thing that I've rarely seen in a Godzilla story. Character actually have to make a tough choice regarding, whether or not he would like to kill Godzilla, or he should, forsake that and, save his friends and take down the Mechagodzilla. Character dilemma like that. Because most Godzilla story is just about monsters fighting each other, and then the human are just a supporting cast. Here we are focused more on the human, and we get to see, how they make this decision. And that final decision at the end of the movie where the main character has to make that really tough choice, it was really good in my opinion.
Yeah, it makes the end in the first movie feel like that it was some kindergarten's, Sleeping Beauty kind of opera, but here it's like full-blown tragedy, and you actually feel a bit, I mean, not like a cry or anything, just that you feel for these characters, especially what happens to them, which neatly ties into the third movie, which the third movie is not as good as the second one, especially with the fact that how the beginning of the movie is more about talking of the aftermath and how everyone is reacting. It's a lot of dialogue. But unlike the first movie, it doesn't go too long, and it actually is a bit more engaging considering that we already know these characters, and it doesn't take its sweet ass time to set this up too long. So it is only a minor complaint in a sense, at least for me. And also, when you compare all these three movies together, they almost feel like different genres. Not that they are different genres, it's just that they have this different tone to each of them. I mean, the first feels like a mindless action movie with some really weak attempt at world building. The second one is more like an adventure movie with some sci-fi horror elements. But this third one, it's like goes full blown into this existential horror, with King Ghidorah's presence and everything.
Yeah, I mean, as Mechagodzilla is a depiction of sci-fi and a bit of a sci-fi horror, King Ghidorah is a whole different level on its own because it is something that I think almost everyone here would love. Lovecraftian horror, eldritch horror that is beyond the capability of understanding. And there are so many different scenes in this movie that kind of showcase that really effectively. Where Mephis, one of the characters that we're going to talk about, captured one of the Hotwa twins. And we don't even know what he did to her. Like, we were just, teased in sort of like a nightmare sequence where it showed that he presented the soup bowl to Haruo. And, as Haruo kind of discovered it, there are some weird things popping up in the soup. And when he went to check, he saw the Hotwa twins' corpse in there. And then the movie flashed forward to that, ritual scene where Mephis is also feeding these people the soup. And we are, as audience, is left dreading over the idea that, maybe she is in that soup bowl. And it just kind of reminded me of the, that's the end of that movie 7, where it's what is in the box, you want to know. It's so scary, you want to see, but you don't see it.
Yeah. Although it's a bit disappointing that there was no actual girl in the soup, but it does kind of serve as a red herring that it wasn't the girl who was the soup or the dinner, it was the every participant in that ritual.
I also like all of the build-up and all of the character progression in all the previous movie and all the foreshadowing surrounding Mephis is concluded satisfyingly at the end here. I also like the ending of this movie. It is satisfying conclusion to a Godzilla story, though I am aware that some Godzilla fan doesn't particularly like the ending that much.
Yeah, it kind of reminds me of this interesting comment that I once saw on YouTube when it related to these Godzilla anime trilogies, talking about what are the stats of the Godzilla in that universe. One commenter made this sort of comment that first movie, Haruo is an angry boy and gets everyone killed. Second movie, Haruo is an angry boy and gets everyone killed. Third movie, Haruo is an angry boy and kills himself. And which is slightly true, but it kind of misses the whole point of Haruo's character, which we will explain. But at least when it comes to the conclusion where, that comment generalized that, it just missed the whole point of it, that it was probably built up with the whole character arc and the central theme in the story, that I thought it was... after all, this is Ken Urabushi's story we're talking about, and when you have a post-apocalyptic setting, what do you expect? Do you expect that, everyone is happy now, human civilization returns? No, you don't get that kind of happy ending in this kind of story. This is a bit tough one, because trying to score this overall, when taking into account how bad the first movie was, I think what I'm gonna do is score these movies individually and then tally up with the overall final score. Mm-hmm. First movie, God, story. I think it would be 3.
Okay.
Yeah, 3. Sorry, I'm a bit harsh, but that's just how it feels like that. It's just exposition, and it only escapes from being 2 because of somewhat interesting stuff at the end, and also this one major character having some sort of development and impact to the story, but other than that, there is not much to say. Mm-hmm. And then the second movie, which I would give 8. And while I initially thought about giving this 9, considering that it's unique in a sense for a Godzilla story with lots of good characterization, which from my experience with the Godzilla movies, there's so many characters most of the time and they don't get as much. Not that it's important, because it depends on whether Godzilla is a political allegory, and it's not like the characters on the center stage, it's the Kaijus. But it's different in this because it's not about Kaiju battles. But on the other hand, I've seen Gen Urobushi's works before, and he has had this kind of the same story structure, and this is not like Gen Urobuchi at his best, but neither is he at his worst. It's more like that. This is my everyday, work that that I just produce. I mean, it is of good quality, but not like among his top tier quality, but good nonetheless. So 8 in that sense. And while initially thought about giving the third movie 7 out of 10 because the story wasn't as good. But when you take into account that it's the concluding part and how the conclusion, the ending, is inherently satisfying, it kind of balances itself out. So I also give it 8 out of 10. So when you tally up the score of 3 and the 2 8s, I think the overall final score when divided by 3 would be
6.
Yeah, 6, which feels a bit harsh. I mean, I almost wanted to give it 7, but when you take into account that you have to get through the first movie story like that in order to enjoy the other, it is a huge problem. I cannot just ignore it that the first movie didn't happen like that. You actually have to watch it. You cannot just skip to the second one. So it is a huge problem.
Yeah, I agree with you mostly. I understand that the first movie is obviously the weakest link here, and I would also give it a 3 out of 10. I am also at the same time more generous toward the second movie. I would give the second movie a 9 out of 10 because, to be fair, I think the second movie has elements in it. Despite not having enough cool kaiju fight and fan service moment, I think the story in general was much better than the American Godzilla story. I mean, it has direction, it has drama and proper resolution and motivation for every single character, and it ends on a rather bittersweet note like that. You don't get to see that in typical conventional North Godzilla story either, and I think that's why that is so special, and I gave that score to it like that. I would say if I were to tally up all of the score and make an average out of it, it would be, just like you said, 6, 6.5 out of 10, something like that. It was decent, serviceable, and not that bad.
So slightly leaning towards more 7, while I lean more towards 6.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess that's fair.
When it comes to unraveling the rather large cast of characters in this movie trilogy, you have 3 different distinct humanoid-like race. You have the Earthling, JSDF member, American, European, etc. You have the white and tall Exif aliens who are more well-versed in magic and predicting future. And then you also have the black people, Pilus Saludo, who are these more technologically advanced type of aliens. While the latter 2 alien races are not entirely unique or new when it comes to the Godzilla franchise, because the Exifs are basically the Zillions from Godzilla Final Wars, and the Pilus Saludos are basically the Black Hole Planet 3 aliens from Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla. I think this movie did an adequate enough job by establishing new and fresh concepts for them. And also, the representative of all these different 3 races are very engaging to watch.
Yeah, because after all, even with this large cast, it doesn't have the same problem as some of the other Godzilla movies we've seen, such as Shin Godzilla, where there's so many characters and so many action going on at the same time that you don't even know who we are supposed to be focusing on other than Godzilla. I think it's of course clear that these movies only have one true main character. Everyone else is just there as a supporting cast, and what I'm talking about is Haruo Sakaki, played by none other than Mamoru Miyano, an actor who is always a joy to listen to. He's a captain and a professional edgelord. And when it comes to Haruo, there are 2 ways I can talk about him. First, there is Mamoru Miyano. I really like his performance with Haruo. After all, he has such a wide vocal range. Sometimes he can be this funny goofball, like... or sometimes, really this cold and sinister one that... But here, I like how when the character goes through this sort of a development, his voice kind of changes over time. It kind of gets more and more tired and like that, but also less angry, more like, you know, like tired from all of it. I really liked his performance, especially in some of the more emotional scenes, like in the second movie. But as for Haru as a character, well, that's sort of a mixed bag. I mean, the biggest problem his character has is in the first movie, because he has no character in the first movie. He's basically just a Eren Jaeger XP type of person who just goes on, we must go back, we have to reclaim our planet, I must avenge my parents' death by destroying Godzilla Roar, you know, that kind of mentality. And he doesn't get proper characterization, or at least calms down in the first movie until towards like the very last few 20 minutes or something, but it's not until the second movie where things start to pick up the pace.
Yeah, I mean, when you think about him as an anime character, he's just so bland and uninteresting, and one might consider himself to be one-dimensional and not that unique. But as a Godzilla protagonist, I would say I really appreciated it when in a Godzilla story, the protagonist of the story kind of have a past connection to Godzilla. I mean, the American Godzilla movie kind of portrayed this concept in such a way. For example, Walter White lost his wife because of Godzilla, and then, you know, he was really an angry boy throughout the first part of the movie until he just died unstressed ceremonially like that. But the Haruo in this Godzilla trilogy, he kept on his hatred, he kept on his own conviction for Godzilla throughout the entire 3 movie, and it's just so unique and fresh, because you never seen a Godzilla protagonist like this. And I especially like that he has his own character arc that is resolved. He also has a very meaningful relationship with other characters, especially towards the villains and his love interest, which we'll be talking about soon enough. And I like the fact that he basically pretty much carried the entire movie. And of course, Mamoru Miyano, phenomenal voice acting.
Yeah, pretty much. I guess when it comes to the other characters, they don't really have much to do until much later. One major example is this professor guy, or the tech guy, or otherwise known as Martin Lazari, played by none other than Joseph Joestar's actor. What was the name? Was it Tomokazu?
Tomokazu Sugita.
Yeah, Tomokazu Sugita. That guy. Yeah, he's always such a joy to listen to, just like Mamoru Miyano.
Nice!
But in this, the given script and dialogue given to in the first 2 movies is rather uninteresting, because he's just there to explain things, and while he does put his personality into it, there is not much to his character, and but I can at least say that he's not as boring as, you know, that one Koichi actor played character, who is someone important that we're not even gonna talk about much about him. But I think I can predict your next line, that, but at least in the third movie he does get some development, and, you know, and he actually ties into the conclusion of the anime.
But at least in the first movie... What? Nani? How did you know?
Well, I predicted it in a sense that you've talked about this when we concluded that the third movie, and also the fact that I already exhausted what I just said. And tying into that, I do like that it does tie into his previous role as this sort of a, you know, knowledgeable person, not so bland and stupid as everyone else who just clings onto hope. In the third movie, where everything looks hopeless, that they just pray to Ghidorah and everything, that he remains as this neutral party who doesn't ally with anyone and provides guidance to Haruo in those darker times. But he also kind of sends him to his doom at the end, where he salvages a piece of technology left from the Mega Godzilla city, which would give the potential to return the human civilization to its previous states, which leads to the conclusion, the final decision that Haruo has to make.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you. He does have some sort of a plot importance, and it's just a shame that the majority of the character from the first movie didn't have that much, you know, importance. I would say, speaking of a character in the first movie that actually has some sort of a character importance, we can talk about this Elliot Leland, voiced by none other than another JoJo voice actor, Jotaro Joestar, also known as Daisuke Ono. Yeah, I mean, usually when it comes to voice acting, Daisuke has always been voicing this really stoic, strong and powerful manly man type character. You know, Jotaro's always yelling and like that. Here in this movie, he's kind of portrayed as a more laid back and calm type character. Kind of reminded me of Erwin Smith from Attack on Titan. I mean, as if the whole Attack on Titan rip-off wasn't obviously enough in the first movie anyway. I think I like his portrayal as a more cowardly but also more calculated type character, and I think his sacrifice at the end of the first movie was a very good and triumphant character moment.
But it is also somewhat ironic in a sense, because his death, where he allows Haruo enough time to get away from Godzilla's reach and regroup with the others, he also sends the others to doom by fighting against Godzilla, because when they later find out in the first movie that the Godzilla that they killed is just an offspring and the current one has grown into this mountain-sized thing and just curb stomps them. And then when you take into account what the humanity is like at the end of the third movie, barely alive and anything, Elliot may have partially been right about the fact that what if they have never fought against Godzilla in the first place, that they would have just left and maybe things may have been better, but who can say, you know, that was just one possibility. So his sacrifice was both meaningful and meaningless, and but it's kind of fitting considering this is Urobushi's story.
Yeah, and also speaking of the other character that we can talk about, I think we can talk about the Hontua people. When it comes to talk about them, there's nothing unique or new about them. They are just the Matra people, you know, the Matra priestess and stuff with the twin girl waifus. They don't have pretty much a huge character aside from the fact that they represent the idea of hope and peace in contrast to Haruo, I'm an angry boy, depressive boy, you know, mood, where they kind of, you know, interact with him and, you know, was just there to build him up as a character, and that's it. And he get to bang one of them. That much I can say about them.
Yeah, although there is somewhat of a weird side story that they have that started with the second movie and then concluded in the third movie, where he couldn't tell the difference between who exactly was one of the sisters who saved him, and he first thought it was the kind and gentle one, but it turns out it was the, you know, angry one who was the one who saved him. And then because of that, he somehow realizes that when the kind girl is offering sex with him, he rejects that, but then he realizes, oh, it was the angry girl who saved him, so then he doesn't reject her and starts to ban her, you know, like there's no tomorrow. And I don't exactly know what the whole point of that, other than the fact that maybe it kind of ties into the first love interest in the first and second movie, that he's kind of recuperating from the loss that he suffered. But it did kind of feel like that. What does this really have to do with anything? Is this like a, you know, like gasp? Yeah, I mean, the story kind of almost feels like that they're trying to attempt that this was something critical to the story, as if that. I was like, so what?
Yeah, it just felt to me like that. And speaking of that love interest, she is not voiced by a JoJo character, but we don't know yet because Part 6 hasn't come out. But she is played by another character, coincidentally also in another show that Mamoru Miyano is most famous for, Steins Gate. She is Kana Hanazawa, who is the voice of Mayuri. In this movie, she's played the role of Yuko Tani, Haruo love's interest and exposition dumb character.
Yeah, I mean, that's essentially what she is like in the first movie. The first time that she appears, aside from the background at the beginning of the movie, where she just approaches, you know, Haruo on the planet and brings up the fact that what he did at the beginning of the movie, trying to blow up things, and then those explosives potentially being used to kill those ships of elders who were trying to board this planet or something like that. And the only importance it just serves is this foreshadowing of the plot of the third movie, and some things that there's someone who knows more closely about Haruo who might not exactly be that honest like that, but she, just like everyone else, especially her true development doesn't really start until the second movie.
Yeah, I mean, I really like the relationship and the conflict that she has with Haruo during the course of the second movie, especially that scene where she confessed her feeling to him, and he kind of returned it. I think throughout the second movie, she was mostly just supportive for Haruo and his ideal, and you rarely see in a Godzilla story where the protagonist has this engaging lover like this, because in Godzilla story, it's not about love or like people interact with each other most of the time. It's just monster fighting each monster and like that. And I think the conclusion to the second movie, especially with the Yuko kind of dead like state with the brain damage like that, it was the very shocking, and I have to say I've never seen something like that in a Godzilla movie before.
Yeah, although you have definitely seen in Phase Zero. I mean, need I to remind you of this? You know, in the church, the choking, the wheelchair, giving this, sort of, sword as a gift. Does that remind you of anything?
Yeah.
Yeah. But anyway, I think the only characters left that we have to talk about, just like every other characters, strongly ties into Haruo's development as a character. And the first one is actually the first real human villain in the story, called Mulu Elukaluku, who has a really stupid name, just like any other Bilusaludo people. And I'm definitely not going to repeat Mulu Elukaluku's name too much. But when it comes to Mulu Elukaluku, he's this very generic type of villain that he's just there that, I'm Mulu Elukaluku, and I'm trying to, obtain power just for the sake of my people, because I want to conquer the world and like that. So Mulu Elukaluku's goal is just that he's looking out for his own people, while he does want to destroy Godzilla. But Mulu Elukaluku just, is more concerned just gaining a power struggle between the three factions, which is present in all these three movies. But Mulu Elukaluku does tie into Haruo's development, because he presents this ultimatum that either Haruo helps Mulu Elukaluku to destroy Godzilla and allow him to conquer the Earth by merging it into this sort of a singular life form with Mechagodzilla, or Haruo could, kill Mulu Elukaluku and blow his, black ass up, into smokes, and which is a really tough choice for him. Sorry, I just love saying Mulu Elukaluku's name.
Yeah, I have nothing much to say about Mulu Elukaluku as a character. You really must say everything that I want to say about him. I just want to add that this is one of those moral ambiguous type of character that is rarely seen in a Godzilla story. I mean, yeah, sure, there are people with schemes and plans in Godzilla story, but not so much one that has a lot of conviction and ideal and a whole reasoning for the protagonist to maybe doubt himself and believe that, okay, maybe you are speaking the truth. Especially that scene, like in the second movie where I mentioned previously, there's this Mexican standoff between Mulu Elukaluku and Haruo and Mephius. They kind of have this whole talk about how they should deal with Mechagodzilla, and Mulu Elukaluku kind of say that he is technical advancement, he is the next evolution in mankind, and transcendent being and stuff like that. And where will Mechagodzilla bear its fangs next? And that kind of question, this kind of interaction between the character and this kind of mind battle with each other is so unique and fresh in a Godzilla story.
Yeah, and while most of the political conflict in Godzilla movies are based on the real life politics, such as how when Godzilla first started, there was the Soviet Union, there was the Cold War, America and everything, and while these are just alien races that they don't really have that much defining cultural stance, but considering that this is not really about countries fighting against Godzilla anymore, it's like the remnants of the human race and these tribes and fighting each other. And the second movie kind of sets the stage that how the alliance is slowly falling apart, because even when they're trying to survive, they all have their own interests. Because it kind of ties into what Haruo said in the first movie, how when humans were nearly wiped out and they spent 2 decades in space, such concepts as compassion and empathy died, and anything only survival of the fittest, remained. And it seems like even when hope is presented and they try to get rid of Godzilla, they just can't rid of that mindset. And in the third movie, that kind of goes into full effect when after Mulu Elukaluku's defeat, the whole alliance starts shaking, because the Bilu Saluda just starts blackmailing everyone else by taking away ship's power and everything.
Yeah, and it does also lead up to the rise power of this third character, which we're gonna talk about, the representative of the Exif people, also known as the Archbishop of the Ghidorah code, Mephis.
Played by none other than the voice actor for Rohan Kishibe, who whose name was it?
I don't remember, Sakurai something. But regardless,
let's just call him Rohan.
yeah. Anyway, Rohan. Mephis in this story is such a unique and intriguing character when it comes to telling a Godzilla story, because we don't really know much about him at all from the first two movie. We are only built up and foreshadow about him, and then when it comes to the third movie, everything is just laid out like that, and he has very intriguing motivation why he do that. He has his own ideology that makes sense, and I especially love his fight, in the battle with the mind with Haruo toward the end there, and I also at the same time like the relationship that they have with each other, and these are friends, and not like in a typical Naruto, you're my best friend, Sasuke type of friendship. It's more like a mutual respect with each other, and it's kind of more in a more realistic portrayal and deeper like that, and I like it very much.
Yeah, which makes it all the more tragic what happens in the third movie. But before getting into that, I kind of want to talk about the performance of Rohan's voice actor, to be more specific. While I complain about how most of the characters in the first movie don't have any characterization or personality, I think Mephis is unique entity in a sense that while he also has that issue, it is completely deliberate, because he has this his voice actor has this really calm but at the same time cold kind of voice, where you can't really tell what exactly he's thinking, whether he's a friend or an ally. Just keeping everything to himself, and how he talks a lot in riddles. After all, his people rely on this sort of mathematical formula or something like that. I don't know, is it some form of anti-life equation or something? But the fact that he feels like this, that he knows much more than he lets on, but we never catch on until the third movie. But many of these foreshadowings to Mephis are showcased throughout the movies, like the conclusion of the first movie, and also while everyone are preparing for Mechagodzilla to fight against Godzilla, he's preparing, for these
summoning rituals,
summoning rituals and everything, and how there are these people there, which are only offhandedly mentioned but aren't explained until the third movie. And he really started to get, send chills down my spine in the third movie when there are some, horrifying stuff that he's part of.
Yeah, and I also, speaking of the mind battle that he has with Haruo, I also like that there are so many different and unique scenes during that whole sequence. And one particular scene is a whole reference to Godzilla origin as a nuclear allegory. We are shown this really cool visual of them sitting on a plane that is kind of like implied to be the plane that dropped the nuclear bomb in Hiroshima.
Enola Gay, yeah. I mean, tying into what Mephis said about how humanity always suffers and just goes through pain, that it's just easy if everything is just reduced into the void which King Ghidorah provides. What I like about Haruo's resolution is that it's not really the Mothra and the twin sister who just comes there, that you need to destroy the beast so it can be rid of. That's not really what gets him through that illusion. It's his own self-realization when Metvius is showcasing a vision of his past, where that moment where he lost everything when he was leaving and his family was left behind. He remembered this one pendant which we have seen throughout all these movies, and which kind of reveals the truth about his name, like how he's named after a flower and a spring, Haruo Sakaki. And from that, he presents that humans do always suffer and like that, but it is part of everyday life, that they just have to keep going, and no matter what, that it's sort of a part of the cycle of life. But that kind of ties into this really somewhat disturbing, but also somewhat of a heartbreaking scene when he kills Metvius, and then he just stands there, and then as Metvius dies, he just reminds him of the fact that how, as long as humanity keeps insisting on progress, King Ghidorah will somewhat return, but it's up to Haruo to making him promise that he proves him wrong, that since he won him against that in that so philosophical battle, but now it's up to him to make sure that he's not wrong.
Yeah, and Haruo's choice was to kill himself. Yeah, but no, it's go deeper than that, because I mean, yes, because human has the capability of expanding and rebuilding, but also at the same time they are capable of greed and leading up to destruction. And as long as that cycle continues, there will be always the threat of Ghidorah, and Haruo realized that himself. As Dr. Martin kind of showed him that human technology can be rebuilt with the nanometal taken from Yuko comatose body, Haruo pondered the question himself and told his wife, one of the Hotua twins that he bangs, that sometime in life you have to fight a battle knowing that you lose, and you just have to do it. Sometimes it's better to have a losing battle. And then he just took off on that flying machine with Yuko comatose body like that, and just fly straight into Godzilla's mouth and say, take all of this hatred and resentment that I built up for you over the course of these 3 movies.
And humanity in general.
Yeah, and everything, and just burn it all to hell, and then, and just like that, Godzilla gave him what he needs.
Yeah, and he just calmly accepted that like that. And then it's just shown that how he's become this sort of a, revert marcher figure or something among the next generation of the Hotua people, or whoever were mingling with the humans and Hotua in general. And I thought it was sort of a bittersweet, but maybe arguably the happiest conclusion to a Ken Urobushi story when you think about it, because his stories almost never has any kind of happy thing, but at least this gave it somewhat of a satisfying conclusion in a sense. Yeah,
and it also ties up every single character relationship and interaction with each other really well, especially Haruo, Yuko, Metvius, and to a certain extent, like every single character felt like they wasn't wasted at all in this movie, except for the Koji voice actor character.
Yeah, which I guess ties into us thinking about what exactly would the overall score would be. So I think you should be the one to start now. So what do you think?
I would split the score a bit into 2 parts because I believe when it comes to telling a Godzilla story, there should always be like a main central focus on the main character, and the main character is the one that drives the show forward. The main character is the one that we are engaged, and we want to know more about him and his story and his struggle. I think Haruo, for the most part, despite having very, very generic and weak initial impression with the first movie, I think he kind of warms up to me as a character, and he, was portrayed very well, and his conclusion was satisfying. In that aspect, I gave it a 9 out of 10 for his character. But for the other character, Jesus, like, they were just nothing, except for, Metvius, who might have boosted the score up a little bit. The rest are just, pointless filler character who doesn't have much role until their specific part in the story is, comes up. And I think it kind of gave me a missed opportunity, I would say. And I think it kind of lowered the score down for to like a 3 out of 10. So in combination and dividing and averaging everything, it would be a 6 out of 10 for the characters.
At least for me, I have a different view when it comes to movies. I mean, in a show that has multiple episodes, or film series that has like 5, 6, or 7 movies, like Harry Potter franchise, you can rate the characters individually and how strong they impact, certain sections of the stories. And the same goes for, of course, the anime shows. But when it comes to these 3 movies, which kind of have a clear, continuous story with no other kind of side stories mingling, I think in these type of movies, is the main character or the main characters, that at least the one that gets most screen time, or the ones that whose narration is followed the most, is the one who carries the weight of everyone else. That they're the ones who kind of determine the overall score in general, and everyone else kind of boosts the score slightly or even severely, depending on how much do they affect the main characters themselves. And I think the supporting cast in this movies are just basically that. They're just there to add in or subtracting the character from Haruo. So in that sense, I guess the overall score I would give these characters would be 7. And I'm a bit more forgiving in a sense that since I didn't really mind the existence of these supporting characters that much, considering that Haruo was the main character in a sense, and they did help him grow much more as a character. So I wouldn't exactly say why they didn't have much character in general, and like that they did added much more to him, that they did serve some kind of purpose, so they weren't completely pointless. So while that's not saying much, I mean, the characters still are, rather bland, aside from Meitfie's Daisuke Ono's character, whose name I cannot remember. But yeah, 7 overall.
Yeah. But that's enough about the humans. Let's talk about something that I think we can both agree that is the more cool and worth talking about.
So when it comes to Kaijus in general and Godzilla, I'm not as familiar as Brandon here. He has an somewhat extensive knowledge, and I wouldn't exactly call him a casual, but whether he's average, well, that's up for debate. So Brandon, I think it's only fair for you to actually to begin this section. So I'm just gonna ask you, what exactly did you think about this interpretation of Godzilla compared to the movies you've seen so far?
Like when it comes to Godzilla as a monster and a character, there are so many different incarnations of him. Like you see the force of nature, that is the nuclear bomb allegory in the original Godzilla. And you see the Showa era Godzilla, who is like, friends to all people and savior of mankind, who fight against other kaijus. You also see the misunderstood beast that is struggling to survive in the Shin Godzilla movies. But now in this Godzilla story, this Godzilla is a rather unique and fresh take on Godzilla concept, because it is based on a plant. So Godzilla, over the course of 20,000 years, grew to be, such a huge and massive and enduring monster like that. And, just the sheer size of him, it's just make you feel like, man, this is the power Godzilla as his most powerful. This is the true king of monsters. This is the Godzilla that truly befits the name God of Destruction. And I also like the fact that this Godzilla incarnation, he doesn't just start straight into battle and just beating people. He actually a very calculative and strategic fighter. He starts battle away using his strongest attack possible, and even when cornered, he resorts to every single final ability that he has to break out the struggle, as we've seen in the second movie, where he does this supernova type building up heat attack. It kind of gives you this idea that this is an apex predator that has lived for so long. It is so wise that it is also, very experienced when it comes to its own survival. Such a chilling and powerful Godzilla to be seen on screen.
Yeah. While I have not seen as many Godzilla movies as you, I have seen at least enough in a sense that they vary in terms of tone. When it comes to Godzilla franchise, Godzilla always has a room to try new things. I mean, that's what Hideaki Anno tried to do with Shin Godzilla. And while it's sometimes a hit and miss, I think this interpretation was really unique. But at the same time, I do like that this Godzilla does tie into the original concept of Godzilla being this allegory of nuclear bombs, because after all, while it evolved from plant life, at least according to the novels that predated these movies, it was a byproduct of destruction of environment by humans, and that Godzilla is less of a monster or a villain or anything like that. He's more like a necessary evil, that humans who are causing the destruction of the planet, that he's just there to keep them in line, and even with the cost of almost every of the entire population on Earth. But it's like humans just brought it onto themselves.
Yeah, and I also like the fact that the original concept that Godzilla's cell can give life to pretty much anything, like we saw with the Godzilla vs. Biollante, where his cell made this giant land monster, or in Return of Godzilla, where one of those sea parasite creatures that latched onto him became this gigantic sea parasite. This movie also has very unique interpretation of that whole concept, where over the course of 20,000 years, Godzilla present is known. He spread his whole influence toward a whole wide area like that, and every single thing in that whole environment is changed to be accustomed to Godzilla present. You have trees and plants life that have razor sharp blades that kind of reminded you of Godzilla dorsal fin. You have a flying monster that has the Godzilla DNA, and you have also the Godzilla offspring, who Dr. Martin theorized to be just a small lizard who, over the course of years, adapt and accumulate Godzilla DNA and became a Godzilla itself. Like, such unique and fresh concept and idea in Godzilla story that I've never seen done before.
Yeah, it is good that not only do they go with the original ideas, but they also mix it with the already established lore. That is not something that they just pull out of their ass. You go kind of like how some people complain about the aliens in these movies, even though those kinds of things has appeared before in other Godzilla movies. But speaking of unique concepts and like that, I think Mega Godzilla in this movie, in these movies, is probably the most unique take of all the kaijus that appear. While I admit that I'm a little bit disappointed that the original form didn't appear other than at the beginning of the movie and in some illustrations in the novels that appeared before this movie. And considering that Mega Godzilla City is capable of constructing different flying machines, the guns like that, it would have actually been nice to get some sort of a cameo where there would have been this metallic replica of Mega Godzilla's original body, that would have kind of made an interesting fight scene. But it is more of a nitpick on my part, because it would have kind of, made us miss the whole point of, Mega Godzilla City State, this, when viewed from space, this fungus shape kind of city that spreads its tendrils of power everywhere, this sort of a sci-fi horror kind of entity.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to sound pretentious here, but the theme with Mechagodzilla is technology. And technology is always advancing. Technology is always spreading its influence. And just like a fungus growing after a rain, it keeps spreading and keep expanding as more technology is added to it. And just as humanity is always known with its technological advancement, so does their greed, so does their capability of destruction. And the Mechagodzilla team kind of tie in really well with that aspect, and also tie in really well with Haru's motivations for revenge, because Mechagodzilla is also like Haru in the sense that it wants revenge against Godzilla for destroying its body. It wants to take over the world as punishment for the greed and the ignorance of humans like that. And of course, there are missed opportunities, just like you said, when it comes to the fight scene. But this is just like a problem that I think that extends to a certain part of the Godzilla fandom, where they just want to see monster fight against each other, and they don't want to see the deeper meaning behind it. Not that these movies are trying to be deep, but I think at the end of the day, these movies are entirely fresh with unique concept, and it should be accepted that much. So in that sense, the whole lacking of interesting fight scene, it doesn't bother me that much. What does bother me is how they depict Mothra. I mean, God, it was such a huge disservice to the Queen of Monster.
Yeah, I mean, what exactly can I really say about her other than that she's dead? Well, and the fact that she's in an egg. I mean, she's kind of dead, but kind of not. I know that at least she has this interesting concept behind her that even after her passing, she had passed her genes and spread it, had this sort of a small influence, kind of like how Godzilla did to the entire planet. But the fact that we see her again in the third movie, you know, this small interference helping with the psychic mind battle. But considering that Mothra no longer exists on a physical realm, that it's more of a spirit and like that. And the fact that Godzilla is, you know, this physical force trying to fight against King Ghidorah, who lives like in another dimension, not bound by the rules of reality. Why couldn't have Mothra done much more than just, you know, psychic interference? What if it would have, you know, assisted Godzilla fight against King Ghidorah because she's more like a spiritual entity, maybe even able to touch him? And while I admit that that would maybe, if handled wrongly, would kind of diminish the whole philosophical argument between Mephius and Haruo. But I guess what I'm trying to say, it kind of ties to the other problem I have with King Ghidorah, that after that whole psychic mind battle, you know, you know, sorry, South Park reference, yeah, where it would have actually been more satisfying, you know, like release that, you know, this sort of a visual conclusion that after Haruo emerges victorious, so does the battle with Godzilla and King Ghidorah, and Mothra addition to that would have made the final battle even more glorious.
Yeah, but it was just one of the many cases of missed opportunity in this movie trilogy. And I think speaking of Ghidorah, this is one of the best interpretation of Ghidorah that I've seen on screen, because, you know, King Ghidorah has always been the arch rival of Godzilla. There's over like 12 different incarnations of him, counting this one. And all of those other incarnations hold no candle or like even dare to reach the like toenail of what this, how epic and how powerful this interpretation of his character is, because he is like totally beyond our capability of understanding. This King Ghidorah is based on a Cthulhu mythos eldritch horror monster. His power is beyond understanding. That scene where he just warp around and kill everyone like that because his power to bend space-time caused them to not know that they're already dead. And also the fact that he managed to bend the atomic breath that Godzilla shoot at him, you know, like just like that. The same breath that in the previous movie destroyed Mechagodzilla City completely. And this is the power that, just like Mephius said, completely dropped Godzilla. You know, Godzilla doesn't hold any chance of fighting against Ghidorah in a conventional term.
Yeah, but considering the quality of all these kaijus that were present aside from Mothra, it does kind of represent another problem with the kaiju mythos in these movies, with the fact that there is such a lack of kaijus that we get to see so much information in the prequel novel that you mentioned that you've read, where they appear, but they only get like a few second cameos at the beginning, opening crawl of the first movie.
Yeah, I mean, the stuff that happened in that prequel story, Godzilla Monster Apocalypse, arguably is more interesting than every single thing that happened in this movie trilogy. I'm not saying the story quality is better. I'm saying that it has a lot of fan service and fan moment that the Godzilla fandom would appreciate more than this movie trilogy. But at the same time, it kind of gives the fault to this movie trilogy in the sense that you have those epic battles happening in the past. You have 20,000 years pass away like that. Why isn't there like some sort of indication that the battle happened here? Like, why isn't there like a indication that these monster remained or, you know, scattering around Earth like that? I mean, it is the planet of monster. Why can't I see a single monster remain? You have the Mothra X that somehow survived 20,000 years and had her spirit in that. You have the Mechagodzilla head who turned into the Mechagodzilla City. So why can't you like have like a location where, for example, if Rodan got killed, why won't there be like an unending magma mountain like that? Or like where King Kong got killed, why won't there be like skeletons that had electric storm, surrounding it like that? It's just a huge waste of kaiju in the mythos and a huge missed opportunity here.
Yeah, and even with some sort of dead locations of the remains of battles, that could kind of remind us, the audience, of the fact that 20,000 years have passed, and this is like the battleground of all the battles that have been fought there. There could have also been opportunities that Godzilla could have still been like the dominating apex predator, because as we saw how his cells affects the environment, both the plants, but also small lizards that turned into these, smaller monsters. There could have also been smaller, not so threatening kaijus that would have kind of like become these servants subservient to Godzilla, that they slightly retained their original appearance, but also being sort of body horror that they kind of warp into looking more like a Godzilla. And also maybe considering that Mothra managed to stay away from the influence of Godzilla, that it even affected the Hotua people with its cells, that maybe there could have even been Mothra offsprings or some at least monsters that were affected by her cells, and maybe some even other surviving monsters that are like these other kinds of threats that the heroes face, whether it's Rodan or Anguirus. Because after all, there is this attempt at world building, what has happened, and having, so many kaijus, like they're reminded of, the ancient battles or the history that remains. I mean, there are even prequel novels to this, these side material that kind of build up to this world. So why couldn't you make more opportunities to talk about, all these monsters, like you mentioned, the remains, the offsprings, the mutated offsprings, and something like that. That is such a wasted potential. But at the same time, even with these only 3 interesting kaijus, I think my overall score with the kaijus would be 8 out of 10.
Yeah, same for me, pretty much.
Yeah.
When it comes to the animation of this movie trilogy, one few words I could say is 3D trash, because this is what I feel whenever I see a 3D anime. Not to say that 3D animation is bad, like there are good 3D animes out there. It's just that the 3D animation in this Godzilla story is kind of underwhelming. Like it felt janky and jarring at times, despite there being some certain good scene with a good environment and good background and good set piece like that. The overall character models and the facial expression they have is just the basics of basic.
I agree. I mean, it's not like there isn't Netflix hasn't done some of these shows before where there's a mix of 2D and 3D. I mean, Godzilla movies are kind of like Berserk, that since it's such highly detailed drawn, that it kind of needs, sort of an animation style that portrays the action better. I mean, they've done a poor job with Berserk, but I do understand what they're going for, trying to portray, this very detailed action better. But as for me, I haven't seen enough 3D anime for me to justify what exactly constitutes as being good or bad 3D anime, because I don't want to be that asshole who generalizes that most 3D animes are bad, or only rarely are they good. There is that one movie, but that's it. I'm not experienced enough, and while I could easily say that out of all the few 3D anime films that I've seen, and even series, that this is technically the best looking one, but that's not really saying much. That's like saying that the shit I took today wasn't as bad as the shit I took last night. But I can at least say that the character designs, for the most part, are pretty well done. That they don't feel like that you have too much hard time of distinguishing who is which, and that they are a bit iconic. I mean, not iconic, more like memorable enough, serviceable, at least in that sense.
Yeah, but it does feel to me that, because Netflix has put a lot of money and Toho has put a lot of money into making a Godzilla anime trilogy. This is the first time you see Godzilla in an anime media. You would expect them to, after all of that trouble to get all of that critical acclaim voice actors, get all the trouble to get Gen Urobuchi to finally, wrote a story for them. And having a competent enough director who knows his craft and is a Godzilla fanboy, why can't you make it like a hybrid 2D with the 3D animation for Godzilla? Why can't you make a show that kind of remind me of Ufotable type animation where it has consistent 2D animation, but then there are also 3D CGI and special effect throw in? It just felt to me like there was a waste of opportunity here, and it's a huge detriment to the entire trilogy as a whole. And it felt to me like most of the budget was spent on the voice actor and hiring Urobuchi to write the story, and not much is put into the animation itself.
Yeah, it certainly feels that way. But speaking of using budget, I think at least the one investment that they made good on was with the music.
I think the music in this is, for the most part, one of the better Godzilla soundtracks I've heard. Composed by Takayuki Hattori, most well known for Godzilla vs. Space Godzilla and Godzilla 2000. He used a lot of classical Godzilla themes here and remixed them, and also add new original sounds to the soundtrack, and making every single movie soundtrack feel distinct and unique. Like the first movie soundtrack felt kind of like a Attack on Titan soundtrack at some point, while the second movie felt really technological with all of that hip hop and dubstep and stuff. And the third movie is more like a core type soundtrack with all this horror and atmospheric sound adding on. It just felt unique and varied, I would say, and I like it very much.
Yeah, as for me, whenever I watch a Godzilla movie, aside from Godzilla vs. Biollante, I can always expect a really good Godzilla soundtrack, because after all, they use the same ones, but it always sounds good. Having said that, because this is a Godzilla story after all with the music, the fact that I've heard this before, it's not entirely unique, so I can only really give it 9 out of 10, because it's Godzilla, it's always good, but at the same time, it's nothing new, and also the fact that there is no iconic, added to it is sort of like that. It's like having Star Wars and not using Star Wars theme at the beginning of the movie. That's kind of how it kind of felt like. Then again, I get that was that Solo movie, but I do give it credit that the no pun intended, that in the end credits of the on these 3 movies, there is this really good end credit song, which, while I can slightly nitpick that there are no good ending visuals, it's just black screen with the credits given. But the song itself, is kind of rises this emotion. It kind of contrasts, all the horrors that happen during the movie, and then there is this calm music. And I do remember while we were watching it that it reminded you of this artist that you're a huge fan of, and you can never stop talking about, and you have albums at your home.
Yeah, I mean, this is the reason why I would give the overall music a 10 out of 10, because I am such a huge Aimee shield. I listen to every single song she has, and I own most of every single albums and new album compilation that she has. I mean, we all know her from previous anime that we watched. I mean, Fate Unlimited Play Work, Gundam Unicorn, etc. It's not like she's completely stranger to you, and I think her voice is one of the more unique in the industry. And the singer for these Godzilla anime trilogy, even though I can't pronounce her name correctly right now, I feel like her vocal presence is, at least to me, sounds so similar to that Eimer, and I love it so much. I would try to avoid copyright here, but I'll try to at least put some sample of comparison between the two on the screen, just so the audience know what I'm talking about. And then that sense, yeah, I say we kind of spoiled the scoring for our, music. I gave this 10 out of 10. You gave it a 9 out of 10. But
as for animation, we kind of forgot about that.
Yeah. So animation, yeah, 2 out of 10. That's so trash.
Yeah. 3. Only extra point because of the visuals.
Yeah. I think the Godzilla anime trilogies are nowhere near what I would consider to be masterpiece when it comes to telling a Godzilla story or when it comes to an anime. I mean, they are above average, they are good, but the entertainment factor that I got from, watching them, despite the obvious flaws and the missed opportunity, was good enough that, it kind of outshined the bad feeling that I have. And overall, the whole trilogy was good nonetheless.
Yeah, while I can understand the criticism that this movie has had, especially putting aside the 3D animation, the bad, boring quality of the first movie, that whenever there is this long-running franchise, whether it's Godzilla, Star Wars, Star Trek and others, you should always try new things, that you shouldn't just keep doing the same thing over and over and over again, because that's when you get Call of Duty, that's when you get Mario. Sorry, fanboys.
So long, Bowser!
Of course, that doesn't always produce good results, sometimes downright horrendous, right, Star Wars? I think in this case, we thought that the unique take was something new. I mean, it's not like it ruined the canon or anything. After all, Godzilla doesn't really have a canon. It just has these different types of takes on the same concept and the story, and they can almost kind of stand on their own. I mean, of course, some have ongoing stories, but this is set in its own universe. This is Ken Urabushi's interpretation of the Godzilla mythos, and I thought that his interpretation was fascinating.
It would feel like my betrayal to the Godzilla fandom by saying this, but I enjoy this movie trilogy more than Shin Godzilla. Like, no offense to visionary genius director Hideaki Anno and all, but I kind of want to have a more, a Godzilla story that I am entertained when I watch and I actually know who the character I'm following are and engaged with their story.
And it's easy to follow.
Yeah. And also, on that same note, let's just judge the score of this entire trilogy. Giving everything that we said and calculating all of the score and taking into account that the first movie was such a huge hurdle, it felt like such a drag to watch through that movie, and it's like a test. Like, unless you watch through the first movie, you can't, and you accept it, you can't really enjoy the rest of the trilogy. So I would say my overall final score would be a 6 out of 10.
It's pretty much the same with me. I mean, I guess if I were to go much more into detail, I would say that the first movie is between 2 or 3 out of 10. I mean, it actually, you know what? It would have been 3 out of 10 if it wasn't for the fact that I cannot possibly ignore it, that I do have to watch it to understand what happens in the second and third movie. So the fact that it serves as this sort of a really rocky roadblock and prevents us from going into these 2 other movies, that it kind of deserves this, score on 2. But having said that, the second and third movie, they're 8 out of 10 and 7 out of 10 respectively. I mean, like I said, while the story is well crafted in the second movie, it's not something I haven't seen before. I mean, this is Ken Urabushi we are talking about, but it is unique for a Godzilla story. And as for the third movie, while the story is sort of a conclusion, it's satisfying, there are some things that could have been done better, like the action scenes and some like the final opportunities for somewhat slight fanfare, even though that was not the point. But tallying it up, it is like 6 out of 10 overall, and I kind of wish that it would have been a little bit higher, like 7 out of 10. But the first movie, preventing people from enjoying these movies is a huge problem. So I guess in that same breath, when it comes to recommendations, I couldn't possibly recommend this to anyone who is not already familiar with the Godzilla mythos, and even the ones who have claim that they know what Godzilla is because they have seen the 2 American remakes. That is not a true representation of what Godzilla is, because it's more of a fan service, to the longtime fans who just glorify, like, look at these cool fight scenes. Oh, look, there's Ghidorah, look, there's Godzilla. But they're more like that, wow, so that's your interpretation. But they don't get the actual vibe that the original Godzilla movies have. So unless you have watched some of the old Japanese Godzilla movies to know what the general tone is, how the characters are usually like, you jumping into this movie, you're just leaving yourself in a disappointment. So I would recommend this movie to someone who is a bit more experienced with Godzilla, even have like only few Japanese Godzilla movies, but somebody who only watched the American movies, stay far away. You're just gonna end up in disappointment. There's no cool action scenes for you to enjoy.
Yeah, I really must agree with you there. This whole entire movie trilogy just felt like a cheesy Japanese Godzilla story with some extra, again, Uroboshi flair, and it might not be for anyone. And it is, while it is for us, I can't say very much for everyone else in the Godzilla fandom, and I know, people have split opinion about this, but to each their own. I think, this trilogy was not a waste of time, and yes, I definitely would recommend it to people that had seen Godzilla stuff before and not just the American Godzilla story.
Yeah. Well, that was fun. Anyway, next week we're gonna keep the momentum going of trying to break the mold on this show, where we decide to talk about a 20-episode anime series. And the one that we chose is, so outrageously chaotic that it's beyond anyone's comprehension. You will find out next time what it is, but until then, we all hope you have a pleasant day. Try to watch some anime now and then, and we'll see you all on the next edition of
The Midnight Table.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon for any new stuff. If you're interested in other future content, please click the links on the screen. I'm Giman, and I'll see you all next time.